Hello everyone. In this video series, I'll be going over how to implement a login and registration functionalities for Android applications. So if you've ever been familiar with using Android apps, you know the importance of a good authentication system, as it's very important and getting to be a very basic part of making Android apps. I'm going to be giving a basic tutorial on how to make a login and registration feature tutorial. This is going to be part one, and I'll probably have to break up the video series into multiple parts because it is quite lengthy. Anyways, so let's get into it. First, what we have to do is we have to download Android Studio. If you haven't already, you can download it using Google. Just do an Android Studio download Google search, and you should be able to find it. Then go to New, Create New Project, and then select Empty Activity next, and then give your project a name. So I named mine Android Login Registration Example. You can give it whatever name you need, and then click Finish. Then it'll take a while to load once it gets the project built, uh, which would take about 5 minutes or 2 to 5 minutes usually. Once that's done, what we need to do is create this package structure. So this is the main package, and for now, I just want you to create a models package. So right click on the source folder and click on package, type models, and this package should be created. Inside it, create a user class, user, and now we're gonna add some code to make this user mapped as a DAO instance or a room instance, room entity to our Android room or SQL database. So for this registration system, we'll be using SQLite as our database, and we'll be using this class as the user. So first, we need the entity annotation, and then user, and then we're just going to define some fields here. Um, First name, last name. So we're, as of now, it's just a plain old Java object, but it changes when we add the primary key with the strategy of auto generate. So auto generate signifies that whatever highest value ID that is in the database, if a new object is to be inserted, then it'll take the value of that highest value plus 1. So incremented by 1. This way we don't have to specify an ID every time we have to make an insertion to this user table. And then we have the username column. You'll notice I'm adding the not null annotation. I do this because in order to avoid default values or having to specify a default value, we're basically saying that this field or any of these fields cannot be null. Um, I've also run into some migration issues where my found value is null and my expected value is not null, and that has caused like have to do some debugging. So I just do not null to get rid of that and make everything very clear and specific up front. Also notice how I'm using camel case. I'm using underscore convention to specify a database table, but I'm using camel case to specify the class name. So Java classes use this convention, and database SQL database tables and columns use this. naming convention. So it's best to stick to those conventions. Okay, so now we're done adding our fields. Now we're going to press Alt Insert to bring up this pop-up modal, and we're going to generate some getters and setters for all of them. And then once that's done, we're going to access it again, pick the constructor, click Select None, because we just want an empty constructor. So once that's done, we can move on to the DAO class. So right click on source folder, click package, create a new package called DAOs. Inside that package, click user DAO, and inside the user DAO class or interface, we're going to program or code the following way. Okay, so we're going to say a DAO annotation, and this is going to be an interface user DAO query select all from user. So what this DAO class does is it acts as an intermediary between the database and the application. So the DAO fetches objects that the application will request from the database. And it's not limited to fetching. It can also insert, it can delete, it can modify objects to and from the database. So it acts as intermediary, allowing the application to access the database table. In this case, it's going to be the user table. So in this method, what we're doing is we're saying get all user records. In the next query, we're saying select all from user where user ID in find user ID. And so this is more specific because we need to enter a specific user ID, and we're going to query the database based on that user ID and then return it if a user is found. If a user is not found, a null value is returned. By the same vein, we're going to use a different field this time. We're going to go with username. So username, user find by username, string username. So if you're wondering what this colon and then the text inside this brackets or parentheses means, it means whatever was supplied here will be applied here. So when we're calling this from our other activity classes, we'll be providing a value here, and that's going to be inserted here through string interpolation. Next, we'll be moving on to insert. So we'll say insert all users. This insert query is inserting all user objects into the user table. So basically what this triple period sign means is you can do something like user 1, user 2, user 3, and so on. And all those user instances will be inserted, or you could just do user 1. So it's like one or many parameter type that you can use to insert one or many users. Along the same lines, what we're doing here is just one user. So just one user insert. And then finally, we have the delete annotation. So delete user, and we specify that user. And insert and delete have no return types because they're just doing an operation that doesn't need a return value. Now that the DAO class is built, we can focus on the database instance that we have to specify in our application. First, create a package, and inside that package, create a app database class. And in this class, we're going to add the following content. So first, we start out with the database annotation, entities, and we're going to pass in the user class. So we're saying with this, we want the user class to be mapped as an entity in the database. Now we're going to define an abstract class called app database, and it's going to extend room database. And it's also going to use polymorphism to have userDAO as a field. So the userDAO class will be accessed through the app database implementation. Next, we have private room database, create database. So this is a method that allows us to create the database instance. And basically we're going to call database builder context app database class context get string and then database name. Okay, let me finish typing this out and I'll explain what all this means. Then we're going to return that builder, but before we do that we need to call asset SQL Lite open helper factory and say allow main thread queries, add migrations, and over here we're going to add a migration. So what we're doing here is we're creating a database instance, and the database name we're getting from our string database name. So this maps to the values, so res values strings, and then you can see the database name. So if you don't have this, just add this line here and give it, this will be the value for the database. That'll be extracted and put in this place. Use app database as the class, and then over here we're saying allow main thread queries, but more importantly add migrations. So a migration is something that is done to update the database to the current state of the application. Let's say you have a application or a room entity that maps to a table in the database, but you've recently added a new field called middle name. If you do that, then you need some way to communicate that you've added middle name field, and you need that added to the user table as well. To do that, we need a migration. So what we do here is first create a new package inside the database package, call it migrations. Inside that, create a new class called migrations, and we're going to add our first migration. This migration is going to be used to create the database table called user. So this is considered a manual migration because this is manually specified, although there is an automatic way to get room to actually build the database tables for you instead of you having to explicitly specify the migration. But this is what we'll follow for now. Database. Okay. And then we're going to execute some SQL code here. And basically we're saying create table user, user ID, integer, not null, username, a text field, which is also not null, email, again, a text field, not null, and then first name, text field, not null, last name, text, and then not null. And finally, we're going to specify a primary key, primary key, user ID. So this SQL query is used to create the user table. The user ID field, which is an integer, it's going to represent the primary key, with all other fields being text fields that are not null. It's a comma here. Okay, so now that this migration is complete, notice that this is not the migration, it's this that's the migration. So migration 1, 2. In Android, it's a convention to name migrations this way. So the next migration would have the following name. It would have something along the lines of 2, 3, because we're going from 2 to 3, and then we'd change the starting and ending points. So it's 2, start at 2, end at 3, which is the current version after the migration is run. So for the sake of right now, we just need the first migration. And all we have to do is click run to run this migration. And as you see here, now it turns purple, meaning it was found. Yeah, so now we've laid out the groundwork for the database creation. I'll leave it at that for this video in order to keep it short. But once we've laid out the database work, what we'll need to do in next video is define some helpers, so database helper function, session manager, and some various other fields and some widgets, namely some fragments. So stay tuned for part 2 where I'll show you how to implement those helper functions. And thanks for watching my video. If you found it helpful, please make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you all again and have a great day.